We're happy that you're with us here today on this Saturday morning. I'm Ali Khudr. I'm going to be moderating this session. And just to give you an idea about the theme that we have going on for the next 2.5 hours, this is the third round of OMRAN's Architectural Forum of this year. And the theme is infrastructure, resources, and production spaces. Infrastructure is one of the most present physical paradigms of a state's power and control over a territory. It allows a distribution of resources, the development of the economy, and the space of production itself depends on extensive investment and capital movement. More increasingly, this capital movement is being provided through international forms of neo-colonialism, and maybe this is something that we can discuss in our panel later on today. But the questions that we want to essentially pose in this panel is, can nation states find alternative strategies to develop systems through which a cohesive territorial planning can be implemented? And what are the effects of these alternative systems on the urban and on modes of productions themselves? Our keynote speaker for today is Jean-Philippe THENOZ. He's a graduate of the University of Aix-en-Provence in political science and law and has a DEA in geography. THENOZ started his career in the shipping industry in 1981 at Navitec as charter broker in charge of industrial projects and heavy packages. He then joined the Compagnie de Chargeurs Réunis as director of Europe and the Far East lines. Recruited in 1985 by CMA-CGM to assume the responsibilities of line director on several trades, including the Mediterranean zone, the Middle East, Asia, Europe, THENOZ later held positions of Central Group Director of the North American lines, including the Trans-Pacific, Transatlantic, and India-USA markets. In January 2013, the group management entrusted him with the responsibility of CMA-CGM agencies network worldwide and appointed him as Central Director Group Network Agencies. Recently renamed in March 2016 after the integration of the CMA-CGM branch network, Major Accounts, Commercial, and Agency Network Management. In October 2017, THENOZ took the lead in short lines in Marseille, SSL Med and SSL North that Rodolphe Saadé asked him to recast into large intra-Europe pool, including Mac Andrews and container ships. So please help me in welcoming Jean-Philippe THENOZ.
Bonjour, good morning everybody. I'm very happy to be with you for a number of reasons, including the fact that I like urbanism, I like architecture, and the relationship between our industry and territories is something which is part of my preoccupation, I would say. So I will present you our activity. I will also explain you what is our industry and what is CMA-CGM, and of course CMA-CGM example, which I will develop later on, is an illustration of the theme of this colloque. So let's proceed. Yes, very good. All right. So what is our industry? Speaking to somebody in the assistance this morning, I was telling him that without transportation and without shipping, shops would be empty. What you get every day, whether this is foodstuff, whether this is consumption goods, one day or the other went through transportation, including shipping, including maritime transportation, which carry certainly over 80% of the goods you get and you consume every day. And our industry is relatively unknown. And it's very good that I get the opportunity to explain you who we are. This is a satellite view of transport, of maritime transport. As it has been put on the bottom of the page, containers ships are in yellow, dry bulk in blue, tankers in red, gas in green, vehicle carriers in magenta. Speaking about container ships, you see this is the yellow lines, and you see very well where the goods are coming from and where they are going to. You see that the Trans-Pacific is one of the main routes in our industry, as well as Europe and transatlantic. Of course, Middle East is extremely served as well. Why is that? Because this is one of the areas where there is a lot of population. And I would say our industry is very much linked to the macroeconomy. Whatever happens in one of the countries we serve, and we serve about 160 countries, has an influence on our ships' filling factor. This is the way the seaborne trade has been developing. We speak here about a unity of measure, which is billions of tons per mile, the number of tons per mile which is transported worldwide. Container is in yellow in the middle. So containerization has been growing the past few decades. I mean, it started about 60 years ago, and it has been developing step by step, considering that initially the bulk of transportation worldwide was done by bulk carriers. Containerization has been a revolution in transport. Our liner industry, which we are in, is serving, I would say, all over the place, worldwide, every country is linking every country, including landlocked countries, with the rest of the world. And by the way, the box itself, the steel box itself that we will see, has been designed to be multimodal, has been designed to be loaded on trucks, to be loaded on trains, to be loaded on barges, and to be loaded on ships. This is why it has been a very versatile utilization, and I believe that containerization has been helping the way the world has been consuming, because it has been easier for importers, exporters, and ultimately producers and consumers to deal between themselves. Here there is an illustration of this multimodality. You've got a ship with container cranes. This is most probably Los Angeles, it seems this is downtown LA, yes. And one of the keys which is close to downtown LA. The boxes are discharged or loaded from and to the ships, goes into warehousing, for instance, to be unstuffed. And this is where there is a strong link between our industry and the territoire. Okay. Then it can be trucked. Into the inland up to the final consumer. This scheme is showing you from one origin to one destination the way things are done. Over there, at the top of the screen, you've got the warehouse of the producer. Okay, let's assume this is product which come from Xi'an in the middle of China. Okay, we will have a warehouse in Xi'an. The goods in Xi'an will be packed, and this is the packaging that you see over there. Then the cargo will be tracked from the port, from the warehouse to the port. It will be loaded in one port. In case of Xi'an, it would be Shanghai. So the ship will go will leave Shanghai and will go to the other side of the Med, say Beirut, Lebanon, and you've got the ship over there in Beirut, Lebanon. From Beirut, the cargo will go from Beirut port, will go to a warehouse, most probably, will be unstuffed. Okay, there is an option to go by train, unfortunately not in Lebanon anymore. But in other countries, of course, it happens. I mean, again, the container is multimodal, and then it will be delivered. We even put the drone delivery, which sounds to be the new technologies going forward. I mean, Amazon are making some tests these days. This is a bit the way we cover, our group covers the supply chain. We cover the needs of customers from a factory down to the ultimate consumer. Why are we able to do that? Because we acquired a few months ago, and I will come back to it, a supply chain provider named Seva. For 40 decades, CMA-CGM was a pure shipping company. In other words, we were hardly opening the box. We were taking delivery of one full box in a factory, and we were bringing it to a warehouse. The cargo was loaded in the factory by the exporter, by the shipper, okay? The door were closed, and the customer was giving us our boxes. On the other side, we were delivering the box to a terminal or to a warehouse, and again, the customer at destination, the buyer, was opening the door and getting the cargo. We decided to put some added value services in addition to this pure shipping activity. Now we will be able to do the stuffing ourselves, do the purchasing order ourselves, I mean, through contract management. I will come back to it. This is a more sophisticated service that we will give to our customer from the very origin to the final, to the final consumer. We don't want to be a drone company neither, but most probably we'll have to integrate drone at a certain stage. All right, let's speak about containerization for a while. And again, what I'm going to show now is an illustration of the way our activity can, or an illustration of the relationship between our activity and the urban territories. So let's start with container to give you a flavor of what we are doing. Birth of shipping container, I mean the container, the box itself, the steel box itself, has been invented in 1956 by an American entrepreneur. The ships at that time, in 1956, were at the size of about 300 to 500 TEUs. Now we are speaking of ship of 23,000 TEUs for the biggest one. So you see that the industry itself has been growing a lot. This is the type of vessel we do operate. We are a pure container ship carrier. And we are in liner shipping. What is liner shipping? This is the difference between taking the train and taking a taxi. What do I mean? Liner shipping is like if you take a train, you've got a schedule which is giving you, for the 6 months to come, the date of calls of each vessel per port. If you want to ship 21st of January 2020 from Shanghai, you will know it from our long-term schedule. And you will know that 25 days later, it will come to Beirut. And this is like taking a train ticket. There is another activity in shipping in which we are not, which is like the taxi. You ask for a taxi, say in Beirut, you want to send 3,000 tons of grain to Valparaiso, and then the ship will come or will not come, or you will find a candidate to do so. This is not liner shipping, this is tramping. So we are ourselves in liner shipping, 100% containerized. The box itself, it's not only a steel box, but it can be more sophisticated. Over the years, the cargo moving in reefer containers has been growing. Reefer container, this is foodstuff. The Dutch cheese that you've got in Spinaze most probably came by container with a reefer container like that. All these foodstuff cargoes moving worldwide goes through this type of container. When you buy shrimps coming from Australia, and it happens, and maybe you don't know, but this is coming with this type of container. We do export, by the way, out of Lebanon. I mean, there is a number of traffics, say vegetable, fruits, and so on, coming from the Bekaa Valley, for instance, or Syria when things were going better, which are exported in the region by this type of container. We do also some project cargo. I mean, the container utilization, the box itself is fairly versatile. I mean, we are a lot in oil and gas, for instance, and big machineries through specialized container. This is the type of cargo we are moving. Intermodal door-to-door solution. As I told you, the container itself, the box itself, is multimodal. It has been designed and created to go with various modes of transport. And there is more and more portion of what we do, which is on land, thanks to the container itself. And this is where there is a strong relationship between the team of this colloque and our industry. To a port by itself requires an hinterland, like the geographers are saying. Okay, a port without hinterland has difficulties to survive. What does I mean by hinterland? I mean covering the landlocked countries, for instance. I mean typically when we serve, say, Armenia, for instance, or Uzbekistan, we serve it, Uzbekistan, let's take this example, which is far away from any seas. We serve it either via China or via Europe, and we serve it with in our hinterland activities, with railways. If I take specifically, because we are today in Beirut, if I take what we do in Lebanon, I will come back to it later on, we need, as an industry, to have some surface dedicated to the container, dedicated to the warehousing, dedicated to the dispatch of the cargo, and we need as well some land infrastructure, like a truck, of course, but also train, which is certainly the most ecological way of carrying cargo on long distance. Okay, so we need this type of infrastructure, which requires some room. Ports, for instance, like Marseille or Beirut, which are in the town, and same apply with the old port of Marseille, will certainly require some modification if you want to do it in a great scale, because the room is not very available when the ports are into the town. So this is certainly something that the urbanist, speaking about Beirut, for instance, will have to think about it. There is a minimum space required to develop logistic activities. And in a town which is extremely built, like Beirut, it will be certainly difficult to find a good compromise between the industry and the housing. But things, I'm sure, will be fixed, and it's good that going forward in your thinking, you integrate industrial or companies like we are to think about the way to do things. On the contrary, you know that there is a second gateway now in Lebanon named Tripoli, which appears recently on the map as far as containerization is concerned, of course. It's an old port, everybody knows it. Here there is some space which can certainly well serve Syria once things will be back to normal, hopefully, and northern part of Lebanon. Okay. So this is our head office. Being in an architectural and urbanist colloque, I think it was good to show you the Zaha Hadid Tower, which is our head office in Marseille. We are very proud of this tower. First of all, because it is beautiful, and second, because it's beautiful. And by the way, it gives you a bit, it's a perfect illustration on the way the group has been growing, and it's also a perfect illustration of the way architecture changed in the past 5 decades. The first building on the right side was our initial building. I mean, we were occupying in 1978 one floor of this building. And there were about 15 people, okay? The second building in the middle has been built about 20 years later. We were growing, we were about 1,000 in this building, and Monsieur Saadé decided to build this big tower and 32 floors. We are about 3,000 employees there. This is our headquarters. With the remark that in our group we've got 2 capitals. I mean, obviously there is Marseille, where the operation is, but there is the capital of our art, which is obviously in Beirut. So it was founded by Jacques Saadé. I believe that everybody knows Monsieur Saadé name. I mean, now headed by Rodolphe, his son. We've been growing constantly over the past years. This is where we stand today. We are covering about 200 shipping lines. What does that mean, shipping lines? That means trade. When we take, for instance, China-Levant trade, this is one line. So we've got 200 lines, whether big or whether small. With the remark that we've been growing with the globalization of the world economy. The fact that there were some delocalization of industries from America to China, from Europe to China, has been the reason of our growth. Because once this is produced in China, you have to transport it, okay? Now, so we've been doing a lot. Our growth is a story of going east. I mean, from Europe to Levant, from Europe to the Gulf, from Europe to India, from Europe to Asia and China. Okay, so it has been like a run to the east. Now we see, since 10 years, I told you that we are very sensible to macroeconomy and geopolitics in general. Now we see, since 10 years, a tendency back west. We see that China delocalized its production in Southeast Asia, in India, in Ethiopia, in the Levant. I mean, Turkey becomes one of the big industrial area for a big place for production of goods for the Europe market. So there is like a reflux back to the east, to the west. Sorry. And I believe that we have to capitalize on that, and especially the Middle East, which is, by the way, in the middle between Europe, India, Asia, and so on. There is a real card to play here for this region. So we've got about, we are over 110 employees these days, including our logistic supply chain branch. We do carry a bit less than 3 million TEUs, and we've got about 700 offices worldwide, and operates more than 500 ships. This is where we are ranking. This is the top 10 of our of the shipping industry as far as container is concerned. The first one is Danish, the second is Swiss Italian, the third is our good Chinese friends, and the fourth is CMA-CGM. I was saying this morning, there is something very special to this industry of transportation needs quick reaction. I mean, being in 160 countries, there is everything can happen every day, good or bad. If we don't react quickly to it, then we've got a problem. The strange thing in this tableau is that there is a number of family companies in it. Maersk is a family company. It's on the stock in Copenhagen, but still belongs to A.P. Müller. MSC belongs to Aponte, which is an Italian family, very, very similar to the Sade family. CMA-CGM belongs to a family. Evergreen belongs to a family, etc. And there is no mystery around it. I mean, to react quickly, you need to take decision. If you need to ask for a board to take a decision, it will take a month or 3 weeks. Then it's too late. And I think there are not so many industries in the world, worldwide industries, which are still belonging to families like this one, for the reason I just explained. This is our volume and our growth. This is our coverage of the world. Here in Lebanon, I am heading the Beirut regional office, which is covering basically all the Arabic Peninsula, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and so on. We were obliged at a certain stage to decentralize our decisions. This is the reason for the Beirut office. Why is that? Because you have to be close to the market. I mean, if you go on centralizing, first of all, we will have to build up a second tower, number one. And number two, we will be a bit away from market. I mean, it's better to have people on the ground to be on the spot when needed. We are very keen on sustainable growth. I mean, we are the only company in the world which will use gas for the propulsion of its ship. I mean, it's a costly exercise for the group, but it shows our determination to be environmental friendly. You may read in the newspaper beginning last week that our chairman, during the G7 meeting in Biarritz, decided or announced that our ships will not go through the Arctic route, which is a very good decision. You know that due to global warming, the Arctic route is now open about 9 months a year. So ships can go there without any special equipment, I mean container ship. Just to give you an idea of the impact, it's a terrible impact on the environment. There are today only 2 companies, including the Chinese company COSCO, which does use this route. It's a huge saving for a shipping company. You save about 10 days. If you go Shanghai, Rotterdam, you save about 10 days going through the Arctic versus going through the Suez Canal, just to give you an example. 10 days, multiply $60,000 per day, which is the cost of a big ships. Multiply 365 days, multiply 8 ships, which requires a weekly service. You speak about a small fortune, saving-wise, using this route. We decided not to do it, and I think this is a courageous decision from a financial perspective, but it's also a very good decision from an environmental standpoint. This industry is growing a lot. It's consolidating a lot. We've been doing a lot of external growth. This is the various stages of our external growth. We acquire quite a number of regional lines. I was telling you earlier on, and it influenced what certainly what you are going to speak about today. I told you that now worldwide there is a flow back to the west of the production. There is also another phenomenon that we see, which is the increase or the build-up of regional economies. More and more production and consumptions gets closer together. All right, and we see it in our job. I was beginning this week in Jeddah, looking at the Saudi market. There are more and more movement of cargo moving from Jeddah to Egypt, Aqaba, and so on. And there is a regional economy which is now developing. There were a few boxes only back 4 or 5 years ago. It's a big number now, which is moving regional. So this is why in our acquisition, we acquire a number of these regional lines. Starting by the end, we acquire Mercosul, which is linking Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina. Because again, here there is this Mercosul market, which is developing by itself. So you don't require big ships of 23,000 that we saw earlier on. You require smaller ships, 1,000, 2,000 TEUs, to cope with the volume. And of course, again, to make these type of services profitable, you have to have on the land ports which are very efficient because the sea time is very quick. Moving from Jeddah to Ain Sokhna in Egypt, it's about 2 to 3 days passage. Both ports in Jeddah and Sokhna must be very efficient. Easy land infrastructure must be good because it would be ridiculous to have a 3 days passage on the sea and then spend 2 weeks to evacuate the cargo on the Egypt side or the Jeddah side. So again, ships depends, and our business depends a lot on the land infrastructure. And the land infrastructure means the terminal, the warehousing, the link with the hinterland, whether by highways or whether by train or whether by barges. Barges, okay, there will be no barges in Lebanon going forward, of course, because there is no river able to sustain it. But this is, for instance, a mode of transport in Europe or in the States which develops a lot. Moving container by barges. I mean, for instance, from Marseille, from Fos-sur-Mer to Lyon, we are using the Rhône River to carry container. And this is certainly one of the most ecological way of transporting inland boxes together with the train. So we acquire Mercosul. We acquire also container ship, which is a company which is very much dedicated in Scandinavia, Poland, and so on. Okay. So this is what we developed because we felt that these regional economies will grow going forward. That this will be produced maybe in Lebanon to be bought in Egypt, for instance. This is a tendency. Now, we thought, and again, this is part of certainly of the thinking of this today colloque, that more and more in our transport industry, the supply chain is important. For decades, shipping companies, as I told you, we are going either from a port to a port or from a warehouse to a warehouse. But we were not opening the box, okay? Now we decided to open the box, and we did acquire SEVA in 2019. This is a Swiss company. It was headquartered in Switzerland. And this is doing 4PL and 3PL. In fact, it gives end-to-end solution. Just to give you an idea of what they do, I mean, and I tell you because there is no secret, or we are amongst ourselves. So, for instance, we've got SEVA has got a contract with a big sportswear company. Every 6 months, they change the T-shirts, the basket, and the shoes, the cap, and so on. They produce everything in China. This SEVA company consolidates shoes, caps, T-shirts in China, bring it in one warehouse in the US, and then each sales of this sports good company, Nike, not to mention it, is receive in each shop in the US a carton in which there is one cap, there is 2 pair of shoes and 2 T-shirts, according to the size of each sales guy in each of the shops in the US. Can you imagine the headache? I mean, there must be, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 sales guys in each of the shops. They pack, they consolidate one cap, two shirts, 2 pair of shoes in one carton, send it to Mr. X in I don't know, in Kansas City. Then the guy is keeping this stuff and wearing it for 6 months. Then the new collection comes, he repack it, resend it to SEVA, which is redispatching it in other type of stores after cleaning and so on and so on. So, I mean, things which are far away from pure shipping like we used to do for the past 40 years. This is a type of service that a supply chain provider is doing. When you are buying on internet, on Amazon, for instance, I don't know whether this is popular here in Lebanon, most probably, when you receive your goods the day after or 2 days after with a guy knocking at your door, I mean, this is a supply chain. Amazon has been subcontracting to companies like that to store their good in a warehouse. First of all, to receive the good, to store it, to depack it, to repack it, and so on, to put your name in and then to bring it to you. This is what we call the last mile. Somewhere, final mile solution, home delivery for finished goods, one and two person, etc. This is the type of service that we do offer, and of course, it influences again a lot the urban infrastructure, I would say, because the consumption centers are in towns. To deal with this type of situation, you need to have huge warehousing. I mean, it can be up to 10, 15 hectares for some of them. We do operate for Amazon in Turkey, for instance, with 5,000 employees in SEVA, and they've got huge storage goods in Istanbul, in Ankara, and so on, to distribute the good. So, of course, it requires certainly some space. And again, in the coming urban plan going forward for the 10, 15 years, 20 years to come, I mean, because the economy and the distribution is changing, thanks to internet, it requires some infrastructure which were not needed a few years ago. So I think we have to think forward. space is an issue, I mean, in general. And of course, I was in Jeddah, there is no problem of space. But going back to Lebanon or France, or I mean, space is an issue. And we will have to think about the way we will handle this new way of consuming goods. So this SEVA is doing manufacturing support. I mean, it can start from the purchase order. I mean, for instance, they are the one which are monitoring purchase order for Ford, the car maker, and especially for their carburetors in China. Can you imagine? I mean, they are the one in Chinese factories which are checking the quality of carburetors for Ford, consolidating the carburetors in China, trucking it to the port, sending it to LA, sending it to Detroit, storing it in the warehouse in Detroit, and at the end fixing the carburetors on the car, on the chain in Ford factory. So it goes from the choice of the carburetor in the producer in the factory in China up to fixing the carburetors in Detroit. So it's a bit far away from what we are used to do. Myself, as a shipping man, I'm a bit disoriented. I mean, this is my cultural revolution here. Final mile solution, aftermarket services, freight management, I mean, warehousing and distribution. I mean, this is all the added value services that we are now able to give. This is a view of our group, starting with shipping companies. I mean, we've got a number of trademarks which are still existing. APL, American President Line, ANL, which is an Australian outfit, McAndrews, which is a European regional office, CNC, which is our Far East branch in charge of Intra-Asia. Intra-Asia is, to give you an idea, this regional, again, economy. I mean, China, say from China to, no, from Korea down to Thailand and back. I mean, all these economies represent about 40 million TEUs. So just to give you an idea, Asia, Europe is about 10 million, 10, 12 million. So you see that this regional economy, again, which I was mentioning earlier on, is booming. Port activities, of course, and this we are back into the infrastructure here. I mean, for a transport company like us, it's important to secure terminal, because terminal is key in our activity. I mean, it's good to, it's certainly required to have a nice ship moving from one port to another, but if this ship is waiting 48 hours in each port, then it doesn't work. So we've got strategic port in our portfolio, geographically, strategically located, and it belongs to the group. We've got also a logistic arm, we just mentioned it, SEVA, and we are also operating through another company, Dry Port in Africa. This is a chain now, like we live it every day. I mean, from a place of origin to a place of destination. You see, and it illustrates again what we the theme of today. You see that the pure shipping portion in the chain is relatively limited. You see now that the bulk of our activity is on land, and again, I mean, I repeat myself, but if the land infrastructure is not fixed correctly, then we suffer from a shipping standpoint. I mean, again, the box is designed to be multimodal. So the quality of the infrastructure, whatever countries we are serving, is extremely important, is key in our development. I will go quickly through a Lebanese chapter, if you don't mind. I mean, we serve Lebanon since the very beginning, since 1978. Lebanon has a special room in our activity or a special place in our activity. I mean, not only from a financial standpoint, but from a sentimental standpoint as well. We are, of course, in the port of Beirut, which is our main port. We recently went into Tripoli. Why Tripoli? Because Tripoli, first of all, has a physical, I would say, has a lot of interest from a physical standpoint. There is a natural draft of 17 meters. So for the big ships that we are operating, this could be a very good advantage. Beirut is around about 14, 15 meters. So 2 meters more draft for ships is extremely important. This is a port which is not saturated. This is a new port as far as container is concerned. There is some good equipment, as you can see. I mean, these cranes come from our Chinese friends. There is a big economic zone which is close to it, which is still under construction. But again, it shows very well the relationship between transportation and economical activities. Generally speaking, if we look at the port we are serving worldwide, the ports which works well are the ports which are close to economic zone, and especially when it is free zone, like this one will be certainly going forward. Okay, why is that? Because there can be in this economic zone some transformation company. We can bring raw materials coming in. It can be transformed in factories in this type of zone, and either goes for the local market or either being re-exported to the region. And this is, again, a question of infrastructure. I mean, again, a gateway which works well works like that. If I take, for instance, back from Saudi Arabia a few days ago, Saudi Arabia, I mean, the traditional port of Jeddah in Red Sea is now competed by King Abdallah Port. And why King Abdallah? Number one, because there is some natural draft which is better than Jeddah, number one. Number two, there is space. Okay, Jeddah as well, but this is not the point. But there is space. But there is now some industries which are around King Abdallah Port, and certainly going forward, it will be one of the center for Saudi re-export, importing raw material, re-exporting to the region. Okay. So this is our new gateways. There are two gateways. Obviously, Beirut will remain the main port. I mean, no doubt about it. But then it's true that from Tripoli we can serve a number of inland destinations. Today we are a bit blocked in Tripoli by what happened in Syria, because obviously Tripoli can serve not only Lebanon, the northern part of Lebanon, about 20% of the population, but also Syria and not only the coast, but also in the direction of Hama or Aleppo and so on. There is no secret. There were a Chinese mission a few months ago in this port. I mean, there are rumors that once things are back to normal, on the other side of the border, there is a project, most probably, to reconstruct the train, which is now not working, obviously, and serve Syria via Tripoli by train, especially from a reconstruction perspective. We are also operating dry port. I mean, again, this is infrastructure. It influences territories. We've got this. This is our first dry port in Lebanon. This is in the Bekaa Valley. Today, this is dedicated to empty equipment and reefer equipment. This is in this facility in the Bekaa that we are preparing our reefer boxes for covering the export of vegetable and fruits from Lebanon to the region. Okay. Ultimately, we would like to make it a real dry port, bonded, in order to import, re-export, and so on. Okay. Today it's dedicated for empties. Ultimately, it will be for full boxes as well. This is what we do in the region. I mean, this is our scope in the Levant regional office, including Egypt. Obviously, we want here to do, as I mentioned earlier, more and more regional services, certainly from Jeddah to Egypt and so on, but also from Lebanon to Turkey and back. We've got already a few services which is covering this area. This is the way we serve Beirut. It shows well the flow. I mean, this is a perfect illustration of the regional economy. You see these different colors are different services, both importing, exporting, and this is our regular line. When we say regular line, there is one ship every week. Okay, so each color corresponds to one particular service, which is weekly. We do link Levant region, Beirut and Tripoli, as far as Lebanon is concerned, to the rest of the world. But you see that we are quite involved again into this regional economy I was speaking earlier on. And of course, we do serve the West Med and Tanger. Tanger, why Tanger? Because it's one of our hubs. Forgot to mention that in our industry we do work a lot with hubs, a bit like airline companies. We've got today 3 hubs in the region, close to 4 soon. One in this Beirut. Beirut is of course where we've got our main activity in Lebanon. From Beirut, we do serve, as you can see, Turkey, Syria, Egypt, and so on. We've got also Malta. Malta belongs to us. This is a terminal which belongs to us, which dispatch in the Med. All the services are not mentioned here, but which dispatch in the Med final destination like Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, and so on, as well as ex-Yugoslavia. And we've got Tangiers. And from Tangiers, we do serve West Africa. We've got big services moving from North Europe, Tangiers, West Africa, and back. And this is the way we serve West Africa. Okay, this is Syria. So we are, of course, in Latakia and Tartus. This is our ships. Full, hopefully. This one is full, good. This is description of our last vessel. Just to give you an idea of the size of the vessel we do operate, we put into it the photography of the scheme of an Airbus A380. You can see the size is huge. We are speaking of vessels of 400-meter length with a draft of 16 meter. Okay, 16 meter. You know, the size of the ships are growing and growing. When you speak to shipyards, they tell you that there is no limit to the growth. Tomorrow they can be, technically speaking, 40,000 TEU vessel, double this one. The only limit to the growth of the ships in our industry is, again, the infrastructure. The land infrastructure, okay? For instance, typical example, LA, one of the big port, or Long Beach, one of the big ports on the West Coast, cannot handle big ships because the Americans were not able to fix enough railroads, enough highways to evacuate a big vessel of 23,000 TEUs. So land infrastructure is of top importance. I think we are over time-wise, all right? Okay, this is our global network. So we are basically everywhere. This is the ports worldwide. And I think that as far as the integration of port is concerned, or infrastructure is concerned, you should try to contact other big towns in which ports are major, and to see how they fix the interaction between the port and the town. I mean, I think it could be of interest in your thinking to exchange ideas on the way they did. That's Yann. Shipping the future. We are a satellite in the air. I mean, this is the next step. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jean-Philippe, for your great presentation. We would like to open the floor for the audience to take a few questions.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It was really very important. We thank you very much. But I have two questions. The first question is, what is the price and between Tripoli and Beirut port? What is the price? What is the difference of price? And
Is the price of a port passage?
yes, the freight and.
Seems to me that you've got some experience in this respect. If you raise me this question, no?
No, it's to have an idea of
Okay.
the people.
All right. You know, first of all, it's true that the port passage in Tripoli is slightly cheaper than Beirut. The port passage, which includes the free storage of the boxes. So there is an advantage in this respect. For the customers which are located in the northern part of Lebanon, obviously the trucks are costing less. I mean, if you are in the region of Jbeil, for instance, I mean, to truck down from Tripoli to Jbeil is less expensive than to do it from Beirut. One of the advantages, certainly, of Tripoli is the fact that Tripoli is not saturated. Obviously, the port of Beirut is not fully booked 100%, but is from time to time quite saturated. But the two ports will certainly live in parallel. I mean, obviously, Beirut will remain the main port of Lebanon, serving Beirut and the south, and Tripoli will serve the north and certainly part of Syria once Syria will be back in peace. This is a natural way of splitting the two. Now, it's true that Tripoli is a brand new gateway in Lebanon, and like any new gateway, difficulties are there because its container is new, because the local community is not used to container but to break bulk. This being said, it has certainly a great future.
Thank you. Second question, you know, I visit the head office of CMA-CGM in Marseille.
Yes.
Really, it's something beautiful, something which it's a kind of dream, yeah. Especially at the roof, the conference room.
Yes.
You have here to mention that Zuha Hadid, she studied in this university there, yeah. And she was the architect. She is at AA. She studied and she was a professor. And in the same time, she was the architect of this building for CMA-CGM
yeah.
in Marseille.
Yeah.
So she studied in this university.
This I didn't know, but okay. I mean,
she did her degree in maths here, so.
Okay. She has been a great architect. And by the way, you know, when Monsieur Saadeh decided to build this building there, I mean, close to our previous buildings, this building is in between two highways. And we are all wondering how it's possible with such a complicated space between two highways to build a building. And the result is incredible. We never, ever had imagined, and we saw the building moving up weeks after weeks, and we were amazed to see the way it has been done and the result. I mean, we are very proud to work in this place. Yes.
Hi, I have a question. What is your relation with the Lebanese local authorities? How much of influence do you have as a company with the size of CMA-CGM to actually put pressure on them to develop infrastructures like the train or economic zones or to the port? Like, what is your relation with them? Do you just come as a normal economic actor, or do you actually have pressure?
I cannot really comment on the relationship because I'm not the one to deal with it, but my management does. I think that there is a long-standing relationship between the Lebanese authorities and the CMA-CGM group. I think that we do explain, not at my level, but at the management level, to the Lebanese government and the states, what are the needs of a shipping company like us. As I told you earlier on, we've got in our CMA world 2 capitals, one in Marseille, one in Lebanon, Beirut. So we are very keen to develop here in Beirut and to transform Beirut step by step with, and Lebanon in general, with our regional hub. Already we do serve a lot of destinations from Beirut with regional services, and we want to go on. This requires infrastructures, this is for sure. I mean, it will require an upgrade of the port. It will require certainly an upgrade of the land infrastructure. Ideally, for a shipping company like us, the best way to evacuate the cargo is certainly the train, notwithstanding the fact that truck is extremely useful and will always remain. I mean, I'm not here saying that truck should be eliminated, not at all. It will always require truck, at least to go to the final customer. But if you want to do mass transit cargo, say to Syria, once Syria will be back to peace, or to Iraq, or to Saudi, once everything will be settled, you will require train, because this is the best way to transport mass transportation.
We will take one final question. We're running a little late. Okay.
How is CMA-CGM going to face the new regulation on emission at seas?
On?
The new emission at seas, the new regulation of IMO.
Good question. We've got, as an industry, containerized industry, we are a mountain in front of us. 1st of January 2020, there is a change of regulation, as you know, on the emission of particles and sulfur and so on. It's a drastic regulation which we have to cope with. So first of all, we invested, I told you earlier on, into ships which get the gas propulsion, okay, LNG propulsion, which is good. We bought a number of special equipment in our ships to clean the smoke of our vessels. And we will buy non-sulfur gas oil. This non-sulfur gas oil today is extremely expensive. Just to give you an idea, today the ton of fuel we burn in our vessels prior to the regulation, which starts 1st of January, the price of this oil today, diesel oil, no, not diesel, gas oil, sorry, heavy fuel is anywhere from $250 to $280 per ton. If tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, or say tomorrow, we want to buy some low-grade sulfur oil, the cost will be in the region of $600 to $700 US. So the cost, the extra operational cost for a vessel operator is huge. For the list of shipping lines, which I showed you earlier on, the 20 names, it has been calculated that the extra cost for this new regulation, due to this new regulation as from 1st of January, is in the region of 12 to 14 billion US dollar. So it's a huge challenge that we have in front of us. Because even if shipping lines are generally making money, I can tell you that 12 billion US, you need at least 4 lives to, to make it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So up next, is this working? Up next, we will have 3 exhibitors from our BIT Beirut exhibit. Excuse me. Okay, so up next we will have 3 exhibitor presentations from our current exhibition that's running in BIT Beirut. First up is Francois Nour, who will talk to us about his project for the Institute for Advanced Architecture in Catalonia, Barcelona, which is called Beirut. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Francois Nour, and I will be presenting Beirut. It's a research I did on new kind of infrastructures for water infrastructures for Beirut. Beirut is the old name of Beirut. It means the land of wells in reference to the accessible water table of the city. I will start with a short video. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the main problem we have in Lebanon is not that we don't have water, contrary to our neighboring countries, but the mismanagement of our water. So the first step I tried to do is to understand where our water go, and Lebanon is receiving from precipitations each year 8.6 billion cubic meters of water. We use half of this quantity to neighboring countries and by evapotranspirations. And from what is left, our current infrastructure only allow us to harvest 17% of our annual capacity. We let a lot of water go to the sea without using it, and we don't recycle any of our water. Also, in terms of the territory, Lebanon is divided into 4 water establishments that they control their water resource independently. But recently, in pink, Beirut and Mount Lebanon water establishment is starting to use water from other establishments, so they are creating a stress on the whole country resource. So step 2 is finding a sustainable solution for Beirut. So we would reply to the demand of Beirut and also soothe the stress on the whole territory. How to do this? First, we have to understand where the water comes from Beirut. We are using first the Damour aquifer and number 2, the Jeta catchment to bring water to Beirut. Then we have 2 other sources, rainwater and the Beirut River. They represent a huge amount of water that we are not using at all. We are letting all this water go to the sea. And number 5 is the Greater Beirut Water Supply Project, which consists of 2 dams and canals that will bring water to Beirut in the future. The problem with this kind of project is that they have a huge ecological impacts. We know that dams are not a good solution. The cost of this project, and also it's a linear approach. So if at any moment, because of bad maintenance or a war, some part of the canals are bombed or destroyed, the water will simply not arrive anymore to Beirut. Also, so regarding Beirut, the challenges are the fact that it's very urbanized. So we don't have a lot of water going under the city. So we're not retaining our water from rainwater. And the fact that people are building illegal wells a bit everywhere. So they are taking too much water from our aquifers and they are drying up. And they are it's like a sponge, so they are filled with salt water. It's mixing with fresh water, and it's damaging underground infrastructures. And other problems like ground reclamation in the sea and the canalized river, which is not allowing any water to go underground. Step 3, how to intervene. So the project is, so how I decided to intervene is to have many interventions inside the city. I divided them into 4 categories: green infrastructure, nature-based solutions, electrical infrastructure, and gray infrastructure, which is the conventional infrastructure. It consists into many small interventions, like having permeable grounds on open-air parkings, sidewalks. The same for our streets. There are ways to filter the water and then channelize it under the city. Building terraces in the valley of the Beirut River to slow down the flow of water and let it percolate. Water parks with a small slope to catch more water. Planting native forests also in the area of the bed of the river. Mussel cultures. Each mussel can filter up to 40 liters of water per day. So imagine the concrete canals of Beirut filled with this kind of mussels. Of course, during the winter when the river is full. Percolation lake where there is space in the city. Turbines to generate electricity along the river. So in winter, when it's filled up, you can generate electricity to power our treatment plants and other installations. Aquifer recharge wells. So we send water with high pressure under the water to push salt water that is intruding. Separating sewage and rainwater system, because in Lebanon we still mix both. Underground tanks to catch water, and then we'll have all the year to clean it and use it. And cut-off walls to reduce saline intrusion. And cascade dams, it's like obstacles in the river to slow it down. So all these installations, if used correctly in strategic places inside the city, can allow us to bring twice more water than the project proposed by the government now. Also, I tried to link all these projects in a cycle so we don't have any waste. So if you are digging underground tanks, we're going to have a lot of earth and sand, so we can use them in the parkings as the filters for water. So I'm trying to link all these, plus the regulation like the metering systems to control the consumption and all these aspects of the water. And so the strategy that I'm proposing is to, if we need water in the city, we should work on installations in the city and catch the water that we have inside the city, instead of doing what is done now, the present situation, building huge infrastructure outside the city across the country, and then just bringing this surface water to our city. So it's two ways of working. I believe the one I'm choosing can help more in an urgent situation, in the urgent situation we are having now. And this is a final image showing a bit all these interventions. Of course, they are more distributed, but it's like to give you an idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francois. We'll have the round, later. Next up, we have Elias Tamer, who's going to be presenting his project for the AA. It's called A Family Affair. A round of applause, please.
Okay. Okay, so the project is called Lebanon, a Family Affair, and the aim of it is to help the Lebanese state deconstruct its confessional system, if the HDMI cable works. So the project is called Lebanon, a Family Affair, and it has as an aim to help the Lebanese state deconstruct its confessional system through manipulating and empowering economically the family as a unit. So the story starts in Mount Lebanon, a semi-autonomous region of the Ottoman Empire, mainly populated by extremely poor Christian Druze and peasants fleeing religious persecution in the area. To ensure their security and self-sufficiency, those farmers lived group with their extended family under a patriarchal system. The whole extended family would collectively live in small houses made out of 1 or 2 rooms, which was called the Liwan house. The Liwan house was not only a space of reproduction, but also a space of production. So every year farmers would grow silkworm inside their houses and then sell the cocoons to farmers, that would, to European manufacturers that would come and manufacture those cocoons. During the 19th century, Mount Lebanon witnessed the arrival of European silk factories. Factories being a new concept, it was seen as dishonorable for men to work in such places. Thus, the extended family would usually send their girls to work in those factories, despite the fierce opposition of the church. This new labor provided a stable income for women that became more economically independent from their extended family and were able to afford individual houses and a higher degree of independence from the rest of the clan. The central hall became popularized at the same time. It's the typology in which the families were living, and with it, the Lebanese nuclear family. Women labor in factory was able to now economically sustain a nuclear family model. The patriarchal system was soon challenged, and women were able to acquire more rights. The industrial development of the mountains with those silk factory also meant that the coast started to develop even more. We started seeing the arrival of European foreign investment in banking, infrastructure, to sustain this export of goods between Mount Lebanon and Europe. Politically divided between the Christians that were in favor of a fully independent Lebanon and Muslims that wanted to remain as part of Greater Syria, the National Pact was signed as a compromise between the 18 different religious sects that were newly integrated to the nation. The Lebanese confessional system is now officially born. The confessional system stipulates that political power would be accurately represented between all religious sects, but more importantly, that all issues regarding personal status, like marriage, inheritance, and divorce, would be regulated independently by the religious sects, undermining the authority of the nation state. However, a 19th sect was also mentioned in the 1945 inherited constitution for any individual that would want to be placed under civic law and not belong to any of the religious sects. Today, in absence of any civic law regarding the personal status of this 19th sect, the situation created a legislative loophole. Economically, the Merchant Republic was neoliberal. In that sense, the state was to stay out of social and economic affairs in order not to disrupt the private sector potential to generate profit. Due to the weakness and absence of state support, the nuclear family relied on their extended family. This can be witnessed to the evolution of the central hall in the central house into a multiple family house typology. In a tormented region, Lebanon's neighbors are used and are still using the confessional system as a Trojan horse to interfere in its political, social, and military affair. This interference led to the breakout of a 15-year civil war that witnessed the final blow to the total collapse of the state that was replaced by sectarian militias. In 1990, the Taif Agreement was forcibly signed by all war belligerents, ending the war and outlining the basis to construct a new modern state by stipulating the abolition of the confessional system. in some degree acknowledging the failure of such system in preserving the coexistence and security of the country. Lebanon by then was an archipelago of close homogeneous sectarian neighborhood dominated by common religious and political beliefs. The sectarian enclave reinforced the clan as a form of protection and substitution to the state's power void, where the dominant domestic typology at this time was the family building, the architectural paradigm of this condition that could be extended as required by the clan family. Among other today in Lebanon, the clan is an ideological apparatus, undermining the authority of the state and allowing the confessional and sectarian ideology to be transmitted to younger generations. Confessionalism today in Lebanon costs approximately $9 billion yearly and is disapproved by a large majority of Lebanese. It has spread corruption and clientelism and has infected every layer of the Lebanese society. On top of that, confessionalism still allows the patriarchal system to remain in place and oppress members of society. Encouraged by recent economic initiative to save Lebanon from bankruptcy, the project proposes to shift back the center of power in the country from religious and family clans to the central government through a housing scheme that will empower the 19th secular sect economically by developing exclusive economic zone and revitalizing the Lebanese industrial sector. So I believe in empowering the people economically in order to gain their independence. So there is an industrial strategy that is being elaborated here. 3 cities in Lebanon are choosing to implement the proposal, 3 industrial sites. These industrial sites will be financed by foreign Western companies that are eager to take part in the $500 billion estimated reconstruction cost of Syria. Part of the site will incorporate houses that would be financed by the Lebanese Central Bank through a low-interest loan program. So the 3 sites in question are Beirut, the capital port city, Tripoli, the former port city of Damascus, and Zahle in the hinterland at the eastern frontier with Syria. The exact location of the sites are chosen on the outskirts of those cities on major circulation arteries, such as the old Beirut train station, the former Iraqi Petroleum Company site in Tripoli, next to the highway that also leads to Syria, and the airport in I think that the military airport now in Zahle. All of this is state-owned land. It's previous infrastructure sites that are not used anymore by the Lebanese government. The site will host industrial zone, as I said, that would produce prefabricated housing meant to respond to the urgency of the current reconstruction of Syria. So this goes in the logic of the Mackenzie plan that the Lebanese government has ordered last year. This is a unique opportunity for the Lebanese state to rethink the current housing condition and develop a new housing typology that can be adapted to both territories as they share similar socio-economic conditions. The industrial zones are located around the central spine, which facilitate transport logistics. So all those abandoned sites would be reconverted in those economic zones, and they would be connected to the main infrastructure system of the country, which are the abandoned railway networks, roads, highways. The scale of the site makes it so that it can be considered as another enclave with the urban fabric, a secular enclave. The site will primarily house the factory workers of the 19th sects in houses that are temporarily placed on the periphery of the site. So it's the crosses that you can see here. The phase will last 5 to 10 years in order for the community to gain economic and political independence from the city and its sectarian domination. It will act as an urban incubator for the 19th sect. These prefabricated houses are made out of 4 modules. Every 4 modules can host 1 family. These modules can be applied in several configurations following key principles. Every configuration can contain 4 or more families. The state controls the allocation of the families within the building. It does not allow blood-related families to be neighbors by insinuating the confessional quotas, creating the network family. So here we're using the confessional system against itself. The new typology follows a base of principle to allow the member of the 19th sect to be independent from religion and create a heterogeneous community. All infrastructure in the house here are shared between the by the individuals of the families. So here I'm talking about infrastructure on a very domestic scale rather than a territorial one, like the presentation that we just saw. Resources of the building are centrally distributed. The modules are free of piping, so the modules on the site, you have a central one that has all the piping, and all the modules that connect to it are free of piping and electricity. And this is made so the capacity of the occupancy capacity of the building is strictly regulated. This principle prevents the extension of the houses and thus impedes the creation of a clan family. Alternately, it allows the network family to thrive, creating a more heterogeneous context. After 10 to 15 years, the houses are dismantled from the industrial sites and ready to be integrated into the urban fabric. The industrial sites are diversified in activity. They don't only produce prefab houses for Syria, but new forms of industry are integrated to them. And the houses are reassembled in a more urban context. They are integrated within different sectarian neighborhoods of the city, creating a network of secular building. The configuration is then adapted to different density and urban context. It will allow the 19th secular sect of the nation to be fully integrated with the economic and social fabric of the nation. It has become crucial for Lebanon, for the Lebanese state, to implement the deconfessionalization process in order to finally build the vivre ensemble that the country was built upon. Just like the silk factory girls 100 years ago that were able through economic empowerment to modify the structure of the Lebanese family and offer it and popularize a new housing typology, I strongly believe that with economic empowerment policies today and industrial planning, Lebanon will finally be able to not only rebuild this vivre ensemble, but also accomplish a more cohesive economic plan which has to deal with industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elias. Our last exhibitor presentation today, before we take a 10-minute break, will be Shereen Doummar, who will be presenting her project for the Architectural Association of London School, and it is called A Strategy for Redistribution Through Public Infrastructure in Lebanon. So please help me welcome Shereen.
Okay, so this is a project I did 2 years ago at the Architectural Association. It's a diploma project. My project attempts to respond to the fragmented urban condition of the Lebanese landscape and its various forms of dispossession and appropriation of public resources. And these are actually a result of the fault in the structure of the nation state as a model to govern a territory. So the proposal is a strategy on the national scale that reappropriates urban resources by establishing a symbiosis between public infrastructure, public space in the city, and the re-emergence of the micro-enterprise. So, and I do that through the revival of the old train network that was abandoned in the 90s after the Civil War, and I use it as a backbone of a series of stations, so train stations that I reinterpret as secular urban platforms. And these break through the existing cluster of enclaves, and they're treated like gardens of no consumption that host the infrastructure from which sustainable micro-enterprises of Lebanese artisans will grow and proliferate to empower this dispossessed community. So today, Beirut has come to be defined by a multitude of sectarian and segregated pockets. These pockets formed themselves when, at multiple occasions, the state was faced with external conflicts. And this has allowed for states of exception to occur by avoiding the conflict and suspending the law. So that's what a state of exception is. So when a state of exception occurs, it happens when the state is in a precarious condition. And this condition is a manifestation of the nation state today, which is in constant conflict with itself, where the nation is trying to bring together this ideology of multiple different cultures under the governance of the state. So this is leading to a collapse in public services and forms of dispossession in the country. So the project wants to challenge this pre-existing notion of the urban enclave. And these are existing pockets that dot today the urban landscape in Beirut, and they've occurred through different periods of time. And so the first one is actually the creation of the nation state itself and the drawing of the Lebanese border in 1920. Following that, the second one, which is actually the most paradigmatic example of the enclave condition, is the refugee camp. And the refugee camp was established in 1948 after the creation of the state and of the state of Israel and the influx of Palestinian refugees to Lebanon. And this is really the urban artifact that allows us to understand the urban resolution of this crisis. And you can see here, there's the Shalita, Shalita refugee camp and Marilis. Shatila, sorry. So these camps, they behave as states within the state. They're independent from the general rule and order that governs a nation. And they were initially established on a series of empty areas around Beirut, but after the wars, after the end of the war in the 90s, they were absorbed in the urban fabric. So these are really introverted enclaves, and they lead to the proliferation of other institutions that behave in the same logic in the city. So this fragmented condition is exacerbated during the civil war from 1975 to 1990, and this is when the country is going to witness a collapse between private interests and state interests. And the city is divided from east to west by the Green Line. And these enclaves, they actually emerged through the opportunity to rebuild entire neighborhoods single-handedly. So an example is downtown Beirut. Another example is Wadi Abu Jmil, which used to be a Jewish neighborhood, now a luxury housing neighborhood. And then there's the project of Wa'ad, also in the suburbs of Beirut, which forms another enclave. And that's built by the Hezbollah, which bypasses the government. But also the war has allowed to create former militia leaders, to control service ministries through the government by collapsing public and private interests and dispossessing and appropriating public services. So even today with the refugee crisis, the Syrian refugee crisis, they're putting pressure on existing camps and further fragmenting the landscape and appropriating resources. So these existing pockets, they're all located in close proximity to each other, and they construct an incoherent urban setting. And so initially there used to be states of exceptions like the Palestinian camp, but now they've been given a spatial and permanent arrangement. So the project aims to reimagine the reappropriation of public services and break through these enclaves by restitching them through a train network, where at the larger scale it proposes an urban strategy that operates through a specific system. And so Lebanon's topographical formation is composed of 4 strips. There's the coast, and then there's Mount Lebanon. After that you have the Bekaa Valley, and then the anti-Lebanon mountain range, which is at the frontier with Syria. So the majority of the population lives along the coast and the villages that dot Mount Lebanon, from which they descend towards the main highway in the country in order to circulate. And so basically what happens is that this is the existing old abandoned train network, and the land on which this sits has been, is actually owned by the government, and it has been actually built on and built underneath. So right now it's very difficult to reimagine a new train network. And in my opinion, the light train network will be the most efficient system for public transportation because today 90% of the population travels by private cars to Beirut every day through this only highway. So by using the old network model and its existing vestige, we can establish a logic by which the stops are located according to the size of the coastal cities and towns. So they're divided in 3 categories. Large cities such as Beirut, Tripoli, Saida. Then there are the coastal nodal towns which serve all the little villages on Mount Lebanon. And then actually these are allocated by sectioning the land and according to its topography. And thirdly, there are the smaller individual towns. And this really creates a rhythm for this system to be developed. So the stations which I refer to as urban platforms, they won't be treated as conventional stations, but rather they're defined by a collection of various elements, which is an economy of architectural elements that will dot the landscape. So these comprise of a carpet, and the carpet is at the core of the urban platform. It's like a garden around around which the rest of the elements are going to be placed. So there's a series of different platforms, steps, ramps, which are the extensions of the existing sidewalks and the street, a bench, parking, which is actually delimited by actually an orchard, and a footbridge, and a caravanserai, which is actually a place for the artisans to trade and make their goods, which I'm going to explain later, along with the necessary infrastructure for the maintenance of the trains and their network and the existing structures that are already there. So once this rhythm is established, the elements can be carefully placed, first by identifying the craft specialties of each region. Then the stops have existing structures, and after that, the caravanserai is placed at the stops which serve larger cities or coastal nodal towns. The carpet is then allocated to the stops that have the caravanserais and larger parcels of land. And I then identify the stops that require the stockyard, the parking system, the footbridge, along with the benches, the platforms. And so really the revival of the train network, along with its elements, is going to be implemented in various phases. The first phase is Beirut-Tripoli. The second phase is Tripoli-Aboudiya, followed by Beirut-Nour and Beirut-Damascus. And obviously today with the reconstruction of Syria, it's important to rethink the first part of this strategy and to rethink that Tripoli-Aboudiya might be the most important part to first develop. And so on the scale of the urban platform, it's really the green carpet that becomes the place for gathering, where the elements are organized around it to create a secular enclave in the city. And it really rejects the public spaces as spaces of consumption, which is what we currently have now in Beirut. There are no public spaces where you can just go and sit without having to consume anything. And it really promotes an autonomous, self-managed space, which is this urban platform. And so this is, for example, axo of what the train station could look like by Madam Khayel. So this is the Forum of Beirut. And these open spaces in the city are cooperative spaces that are leased by the government for free because the government owns the land. So that would be the strategy, and they would be used by the general public. And so I'm just going to quickly zoom through this idea of the caravanserai. The caravanserai at the time of the Ottoman Empire was a functional and universal point of gathering for merchants until its fall. So what I did is that I used it as a typology to redesign that space for the artisans to be able to manufacture but also distribute their goods. It's essentially inverted and it's open on one side, and it's used on the first floor for the distribution and the selling of the goods, and on the second floor as a workshop. So that addition of the caravanserai to the urban platform, it's really a strategy to bypass the need for a highly commercial space that normally renders the train network profitable in every other country in the world today. And you know, they've been very highly privatized, the stations. So it really provides an alternative way to develop an alternative source of profit for the infrastructure network. So ideally, it would be run by an associations that would support the artisans to access capital, market their product, but also empower this community of that actually comprises a very large percentage of the Lebanese population. So it's actually the caravanserai is using its location along the train network to transfer the goods along the coast and recreate a coherent nationally. And so this platform really behaves as an extension of the sidewalk, and it provides a space for gathering and the proliferation of informal activities that are typically occurring in the streets of Beirut, especially on the pavements today. So this assemblage of elements are going to adapt themselves individually to different locations, where this train slows down, there is heavier and wider architectural elements, and as it accelerates, these elements thin out. So these are just a few examples. For example, in Saida, where there is a caravanserai, and it's actually creating the link between all the agricultural fields and the edge of the city. So this is a simulation of it. And then there's Sen El Fil, which is sitting on the edge of Beirut, and it's merging large roads that distribute traffic around Beirut. So it's really creating a connecting point in between these neighborhoods. And then there is the Mar Mkhayel station, which actually here, the caravanserai, you can see it reinforces that commercial line that we all know through its edge. And the tracks progress north through Jaledib, where it's linking the urbanized part of the territory to its coastal front. And then there is Jounieh and so on. I'm just going to zoom through these. Here you can see Batroun. And then eventually, of course, there is Tripoli, which is the last stop on the Lebanese coast. So really the urban platforms, they are additions to the existing enclaves in the urban landscape, but there are also secular enclaves that break through all these segregated pockets. And these pockets, they're created by the failure of the states to sustain itself and to propagate. And what these stations do is that they're going to propagate around them a change in the urban structure, while also connecting the train line, which is establishing this national coherence I'm talking about. And so this urban strategy is an attempt to bring together a collection of elements necessary to the continuity of an urban context by redistributing public resources. So the government-owned land is put back into use by bringing together public infrastructure, public space, and allocating a part of the land to associations that will create a microeconomy through this framework and allow the redistribution of wealth inside smaller sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shereen. We're going to take a 15-minute break now, so we will reconvene at 10-minute break. 10-minute break, okay. We're going to take a 10-minute break now, so please, I invite you all to enjoy the refreshments and snacks we have outside, and we'll be back here in 10 minutes to resume our roundtable. Thank you. Impact the way cities grow, function, and how they participate in the global economy. We have a water management systems project for the Beirut and the greater Beirut region. We have a project to regenerate the railway lines, and we have a project to sort of socially engineer the future of the Lebanese state. And also we're joined by Yumna here today, who is, I'd like you to give just an introductory sentence about what you do, please.
Yes, hello. I'm into business. I work as a brand manager in an industrial company. So we have a factory and we produce mainly personal care product and cosmetics products.
Okay, perfect. So we have somebody from the production, from shipment, and we have 3 aspiring architects who have worked on certain infrastructural projects that are meant to push our country forward. Now, what I would like to do is to sort of, the first question I'd like to pose is, let's take, for example, your comment on hopefully introducing peace in Syria and how that could impact the growth of the city of Tripoli, Mr. THENOZ. So to talk a bit about Tripoli as a city and how it positions itself in Lebanon's national economy, how do you see the future of Tripoli growing?
Well, ports, wherever they are located, are extremely influenced, as I told you, by their hinterland. And the way a port is linked to its hinterland. We speak about Tripoli this morning, but we can equally speak about Beirut. I mean, Beirut has been serving Damascus, speaking about Syria, for decades. It stopped due to the circumstances. But whenever peace will be back, and hopefully as soon as possible, then this transfer of goods from the port of Beirut into the Damascus area will be resumed. And by the way, this is also one of the reasons for which we set up this Bekaa Valley facility today, which is only dedicated to empties, as I said. But tomorrow will be certainly a bonded place in which we will handle full boxes, not only for local consumption and local needs, in the Bekaa, for instance, but also for certainly being a base arrière for Syria. So that's Beirut. Same applies with Tripoli, with the remark that Tripoli has a huge space available. I mean, we are speaking about these 50 hectares of the coming free zone, and here, most probably, there will be a lot of industries which will be settled there, either for re-exporting, as I said, or to serve for the Syria reconstruction. Because obviously, from a geographical standpoint, and due to the space available, I mean, Tripoli has a very strategic role to play in this respect. But it requires also infrastructure. Unless we want Noria of trucks moving on from Tripoli port to Syria and back, which will happen for sure. But of course, ideally, the train is certainly the solution.
To build upon that and develop a more, or to pose a more general question, to what degree do you see state centralization changing with respect to Tripoli? Because as we know, everything in Lebanon is centralized around Beirut, whether it's the economy, the industries, the shipment and movement, and really everything else that has to do with the government. And when we look at some of the projects that have been posed, particularly Shereen and Elias's, they depend on this notion of decentralizing Beirut. They depend on the notion of moving people outside of the city, having them explore new geographies, and then somehow returning to Beirut to try to fix Beirut.
I just want to add something to everyone who's talking about the reconstruction of Syria, and that is that sees this as the way for the Lebanese economy to grow back again. Yes, we can develop infrastructure to link back Tripoli to Syria and build more highways to Syria, but we're just going to be a transit country. We're never going to... There is an industrial politic that needs to be placed in Lebanon. We have a very high unemployment rate right now. The government for years have been developing the tertiary sector, the service sector, and has completely left the industrials on the side, like the industrial production on the side. And Lebanon will never prosper without an industry, without a strong industrial sector, because infrastructure obviously does accompany industries, as you've explained it before. But we will never, as a country, will never fully take advantage of the reconstruction of Syria if we do not develop our own industry. So this is something that I think should be targeted here on this panel, because it is about infrastructure and production as well, how to link them together. And I actually have a question for Yumna that works in industry to ask, because we have talked about infrastructure, but not enough about industry, to talk about what are the main challenges as industrials in Lebanon that you face towards exporting to Syria or even producing in Lebanon, if you can elaborate a bit on that. Maybe, I mean, the question goes to everyone as well, but.
Yes, of course. Actually, I was going to talk about this. All the projects that were presented today are related to the production and to the industrial companies. Today, for example, Lebanon is the most expensive country to export from in the region. So for us as industrial, to export abroad is very expensive. We're out of 160 countries, we're maybe number 79th when it comes to trade friendliness. Customs are very expensive. The ports, the infrastructure that were presented in the presentation of CMA, it shows that the ports have major potential, that we need a more developed infrastructure that could help our production. We also need free zones, industrial zones. The cost of production is very expensive in this country. And we all know that industrial companies have been shown through a lot of studies that they're the #1 multiplier of employment. So without industrial companies, the unemployment rate will automatically remain high. So I think that there's a lot of effort that needs to be done to support industrial companies in Lebanon. And to go back to the presentation of Shereen also, of course, it is very important to have train railroads. For us, just to move around our products around Lebanon, because of traffic, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. The same goes to exportations. We could easily export from Tripoli to Syria. We have major potential to export to Iraq. We have major potential to export to Turkey, which is a huge country with a very big population, because as we all know, Lebanon is a very small population. So if we're an industrial company and we only rely on the population of Lebanon, we will never cover our costs of production. So to create good economies of scales, we need to export. To export, we need infrastructure. To develop infrastructure, we need a government that is going to invest. And the McKinsey report, which Elias mentioned in his presentation, shows exactly this, that there needs to be a huge investment towards industry in Lebanon, towards creating industrial zones, business hubs, developing the Tripoli port, and developing even a railroad that would connect Tripoli and Beirut ports to help industrial companies.
But arguably the largest part of government expenditure in the last 10 or so, 10, even 20 years post-Civil War has been into infrastructure, just not the right kind of infrastructure. So right now we have the dam projects, for example, which Francois talked extensively about, that are being built. And it is a form of infrastructure, but is it the right kind? Is it what we're looking for? Is it what we need?
Of course, as industrial, we need some resources. Water is a very important resources for our production, especially if we're ISO environmental certified, which is what my company is certified in. So we have a lot of rules that comes to wastage of water, of natural resources, of wastage, all of these problems that none of them are really treated in the country, yet alone in how do they expect industrial companies to treat these issues when the government isn't even treating them in their own country. So again, I think yes, they're treating the problem, they're mistreating the problem because everybody treats the problem that will make them the most money, unfortunately. So government doesn't think, unfortunately, about the people, they're thinking about what kind of infrastructure would bring us more money. We're trying to think of what kind of infrastructure would help industrial companies to help us grow the country, to help us create employment, to help us open our market. So that's kind of my answer to that.
I want to add something about this subject, the infrastructure. It's not only locally, it's also worldwide. The World Bank is helping a lot with building dams in third world countries, while bigger countries are like removing dams and these kind of infrastructures. So there is this image that, okay, these countries are helping, but actually it would be better if we develop adapted strategies here than just importing these concepts and applying them on the territory?
Well, I don't want to appear as a Tripoli promotion manager, but but still, speaking about free zone and industrial zone, it's true that this space available in Tripoli is certainly matching a number of needs as far as production is concerned. There is a space, there is a port of exit. You know, the best example of a port which is linked to an industrial zone in the world is Tanger Med. The Moroccan government 10, 15 years ago decided to build up a huge port in Tanger, which is close to a huge industrial area. A lot of car manufacturers, Renault, Peugeot, the Japs and so on, settle, and the Germans settle factories over there. Same for textiles, same for a number of other commodities which are produced there, which created hundreds of thousands of jobs. This is a free zone. It's both for the local economy, the Moroccan economy needs, but also there is a lot of free export from Tanger back to Europe, back to Africa. It creates a huge opportunity for Morocco, and I am sure that in Lebanon, in Tripoli, for instance, but I'm not limiting it to Tripoli. Tripoli exists because this is why I'm speaking about it. It can have the same success, because all the natural qualities required, the space, the port, the infrastructure, and so on, are potentially there. And it totally matches what you were saying.
I want to add to this that studies have shown that there is a lot of potential for Lebanon in exports. There are about $7 billion wasted, untapped exports from Lebanon. And this is mainly due to the lack of infrastructure, to the customs, to mismanagement of government. So there's a lot of potential. So I completely back up the fact that there is potential with the port of Tripoli to, again, increase exports, boom the economy of Lebanon. It's a huge, huge potential. I cannot stress enough.
I just want to add something. Looking at all these issues, do you feel, as Vice President of CM and you, Yumna, working in the industries, do you feel that architects have a role in helping you resolve these issues? And would you feel that architects could bring an added value to designing infrastructure and helping out industries? I'm interested in knowing if your companies would be interested in having the input of architects, and if you see an added value in that.
As we are concerned, the reply is yes. I mean, as I told you, we are extremely sensible to the environment, and we've got a social role and we've got a social responsibility in this respect. The worst would be to build up infrastructure or warehousing or production centers which are not environmental friendly, which are, from a design standpoint, horrible. I mean, this is not at all what we want to achieve. We want to achieve a network and a supply chain which is integrated in its environment. I mean, yes, so the reply is yes, of course.
I completely agree with this. I think that architecture have a huge role in Lebanon because there's a lot of work to be done with infrastructure. Especially, you have the transportation side, which you mentioned in your presentation, that needs a huge work to help us. Not only do we transport goods, but we have salespeople that move all over the country. This is all high cost for us. And we also have the production facilities that needs rework for, of course, to protect the environment, to be environmentally friendly. And also there's the GMP now standards that are required in a lot of countries where the factory has to be built in a certain way. to create a sanitary environment, to create economies of scale. So this also needs input from architects. So I think that architects have a huge role, but we do need a lot of investment, and this is where the government has to play its part.
I just want to add on top of that is that I think Lebanese politicians are very low ambitious people. So Lebanon doesn't have a plan. I mean, even Saudi Arabia now launched a 2030. Every country has a vision of where they're going to be in 10, 20, 50 years maybe. In Lebanon, we're living on the day-to-day. So we're building a small bridge there, a small intersection here. But in the regional picture, the bigger picture, we have no idea where we're going to be. And Lebanon today, as it is, has absolutely almost no competitive advantage to the countries surrounding it. I'm talking about Turkey and even other countries. And I don't know how long Lebanon as a country can survive like this with no big picture or big vision of where it wants to be. If we can't even supply our own country with electricity, we have to import electricity from Syria at this stage, which is very sad. I don't know where we're going to be in 10 to 15 years. Like if the country can survive till when, how much is unemployment going to continue growing? How much is the deficit going to continue before politicians wake up that a national plan is required, a territorial plan is required? When are we going to link our infrastructure to the Syrian one to be able to export to Iraq? When are we going to help our industrials? I mean, the banks are overly being helped in Lebanon by the government. Why aren't they doing the same for the industrial sector or everything that has to do with infrastructure? I don't know if anyone here has an answer, or maybe in the audience, but...
Well, for the most part, the banks are the government, if you think about it, but that's a totally different topic, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say that to back up what Elias is saying, from the billions of dollars of the CEDAR plan, there's only about $75 million that would go into an investment for industrial companies, which is a very, very low budget, since industrial companies are, again, a multiplier of employment in the country. So just to back up what Elias is saying, that the government, I think, is really unaware of how much industrial companies and the infrastructure to help these industrial companies is important at this point. And that, just to re-stress again, if we have to build industrial zones in the country, that would help a lot of companies in Lebanon. We would require a lot of help from architects. So I think it's really important also to support architects.
To stay on that point, where do you think is the most suitable geography for you to build an industrial zone in Lebanon right now?
Where would it be the most suitable place? Well, I think to back up what we just said,
Tripoli we've established.
Yes, I think but it's true, because the fact that you are near a port and a free zone would save us a lot of money, and it would speed up production, it would speed up transport. Unfortunately, that's a big problem in Lebanon, that everything is so slow moving because we don't have the right transportation, because we don't have the right resources, because everything has to be related to politics, to religions, it's just, we need much more support from the government to build the infrastructure, to make it a more viable environment for industrial companies.
I want to move a little bit away from consistently blaming the political collapse that we live in, because it's something that we all understand, it's something that we all live in on a day-to-day basis. But I want to sort of take this conversation forward. How do we see, whatever utopian future scenarios we can imagine, what would be the most immediate sort of way to push forward our industrial sectors, and with that, investments that are related to infrastructure?
I think that
and environmental and resource management, of
just
course.
From my point of view, one thing that Lebanon can do immediately to save its industry is to revise all the treaties that it has signed randomly with countries that gives Lebanon a huge disadvantage in production. So it's really because there was no strategy back then, so treaties were signed here and there with countries without really taking the impact on the local market. So something that can be done immediately is revise some of those treaties. I'm not calling for Lebanon to be a protectionist country, very far from that.
It already is one. In many
Yes, but
ways.
you have like, I think they can explain better, but you have like stuff like Euro 1, everything that's produced in Europe enters without customs. Like this, for example, gives you a very big disadvantage. So it's those small things that can immediately maybe have an impact.
But then before the civil war, this was, I'm going to give you the platform in a bit, but then before the Syrian civil war, this was kind of the goal, this was the dream. Turkey was moving towards opening up its regional economies towards Syria, towards Lebanon. They were proposing building a highway and a railroad, and they wanted to
But
sort
I
of
mean, in
include all
Turkey,
of
first
this.
of all, industries are subsidized by the government. Electricity is widely available,
Of course,
as THENOZ water.
of course.
And also in Turkey, you're talking about a market that is for millions, like tens of millions of
But
people.
I'm not talking about the Turkish market. I'm talking about the possible impact that could have done here in Lebanon. And then it was sort of impeded by the Syrian civil war. Why haven't we managed to sort of think of surrogate strategies?
I mean, I'm just going to give you a simple example. Today, if you go to a supermarket, you have a lot of new Turkish chocolate brands that have entered the market and are eating more and more shelf spaces in supermarket, while Lebanese brands are growing shorter. That's an example of, for example, something, I mean, we're producing chocolate, why not encourage this industry? Why go and import from Turkey? It's like those, I mean, it's very small things, but, you know, it's decision making.
Shereen, you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring back the conversation a bit around the architect, and maybe this is something we're going to discuss in the second round this afternoon. But since we're all very frustrated with what's going on with the state and the management of, you know, its resources, etc., I think that maybe somewhere on the smaller scale, not forgetting, but putting a bit aside these problems, there might be an opportunity for architects, urban thinkers, and other people that are involved in these issues to find alternative strategies in order to take advantage of the fact that, and I know it might sound a little bit paradoxical, but take advantage of the fact that the state is not helping. So are there other strategies through which we can promote maybe microeconomies and through grassroots movements, but also through thinking about larger scale infrastructural projects, how through these projects we can bring back like civic value. And so I think this is also a conversation worth having, especially when we're in a room full of architects, and it would be great if we could have some questions from the audience in order to develop also on these ideas. Because I think that today in Lebanon there are a lot of small initiatives that are focused on things like public space and so on, but there is a way to also allow these organizations to work hand in hand with larger scale projects in order for these to create a more symbiotic relationship in the urban planning and the national planning of the Lebanese territory. So.
Well, on that note.
Just a last idea. I think the three of us here studied abroad for a certain time and we came back and we developed a different vision towards the territory and how we see things in Lebanon. There is this problem that here in universities sometimes we don't develop enough critical thinking or we don't re-question ourselves, and it's important to like, because in Lebanon every year there is 12,000 engineers and architects of all kinds that graduate, and we should start using these people as an army to think better, because it's them that will like affect the decisions and everything. Because now if we still do the same, it's gonna still be small initiatives and not very large-scale things. That's it.
Absolutely. I'd like to open up the floor for the audience. Whoever would like to ask a question. We have around 10 minutes for engagement with the speakers. Okay. So I'm going to reclaim this time then and give it.
I might have a question. No, it's actually, I don't know if it's a bit pessimistic, but when you're talking and everything, and when Yumna and Jean-Philippe was talking, also we're talking, I wonder if Lebanon can ever be competitive. Like, I feel like other countries are just moving so fast, and I feel that we're just like it's really a situation where we all feel frustrated, because even Jean-Philippe was saying that, and Yumna, that when you're in industry, even in infrastructure, it's something that you have to, like, you have a vision for 10, 15 years, and I'm sure your companies, like SAMA, I'm sure has a vision for like 30 or even not 50 years. Like you were doing your presentation, you were saying that we're not talking about right now, we're talking about 100 years, how shipping is going to be. And I wonder, like, is it like it's, I don't know, maybe it's too pessimistic, but I feel like it's never going to happen. And I feel like do maybe find other ways to do production, maybe find, and maybe it's a bit what Elias was saying with treaties and signing treaties with other countries, is rather than saying, okay, Lebanon as a country is gonna do it by themselves, maybe talking on a more regional level. We were talking more about the European Union, and we were talking about the Mediterranean, like the region of the Mediterranean. And I was wondering, like, in terms of more of a regional kind of aspect, where Yumna and Jean-Philippe, like, what other countries can we cooperate with, or maybe do we have a certain aspect of building some sort of regional infrastructure or regional production spaces?
First of all, looking from the outside, I'm French. For sure, you've got a huge advantage, you as Lebanese versus your neighbors. You've got the best traders, you've got the best merchant of the region by far. So I would say it's a huge...
That's part of the problem.
Sorry?
That's part of the problem.
I'm not sure it's part of the problem. I mean, you've got a capacity to adapt to situation and difficult situation, which is very rare, right? And I'm sure that you will find ways and means to go on with the tradition of the Phoenician, which at the end dominated this part of the Med, and even more. Your capacity to act, and I can speak about it because I've been traveling in the region for the past 30, 40 years, so I know what I'm speaking about. Your capacity to adapt and your capacity to survive will make the difference. And even if there is not a global vision due to the politics like it is today, but no one knows about tomorrow, even if there is not a global vision, the fact that citizen, people like you, here and outside, are able to organize themselves to find, like Madame was saying, a small project and some developments, local developments, and so on, at the end will make the difference. I am convinced about it, convinced about your capacity to do something great, like our good friend in America would say. All right?
Thank you very much for everybody for this presentation. What I heard this morning during each presentation of any one of you, it's very important for Lebanon and for the future, especially future young people. To give you an idea, you know that at least 75% of the parliament, of the deputy, they don't know anything about economy, industry, trade, development, all the subject we have discussed this, you have presented this morning. You have 75% of those people, they not are aware about all this subject. It's pity, because in all country civilized, they understand they have a committee to discuss and to hear about people. What is the future? What is the planning? What is the vision of the industry, the trade, agriculture, and so on? And you know that in the minister, you have approximately also 75% of our minister, they are not aware about all the subjects you have presented this morning. For them, the most important, it's what kind of project, and if they have their own people, they will take care about this project, they will try to do it, and so on. So I give you an idea. It's to write for the Prime Minister and ask them to present to the people in the to our deputy in the Parliament what you have present this morning, and also for the Prime Minister and the Parliament about this subject. And congratulations.
Honestly, something I want to say, every society has the politician it deserves. So in Lebanon, those people were elected. And if this is what the people want to, and if this is the level of politician the people in this country want to, then they have to somehow assume the consequence of what they did. And also, just to get back to the idea of ministers, I think we have invited for the opening of our exhibition a lot of politicians that go out every night to superficial dinners where they congratulate them for the job they're doing. And I want to say that it's a shame that none of them has shown up either to this conference or to the opening of the exhibition. We have talked to some politicians previously that told us that they do not feel concerned about the topics we're talking about, even though they're running the country. So this is just to give you the level of the people that are running the country. So yes, I just want to emphasize that it is very shameful what is happening on our highest decision-making policy level. It was just to thank you for that comment and to ask people when are they going to wake up in a way. So.
Okay, we're going to have to, we have one more question.
A question, or probably a more positive note to finish the conversation. And basically, I think that with the work that I have seen, there is a raise of the idea of regional planning that in a certain way has been there for at least the last 20 years, this recovery of notions by Patrick Geddes, in which it is necessary to have a more organic relationship between the planning of a territory and the real environment in which this planning is happening, both from the point of view of, let's say, the natural environment of the region, but also from the point of view of other people like Castell and the followers, talking more of the organic relationship to the populations, the grassroots movements, and so on. So in the last 20 years, we have witnessed how there were new institutions and new political organizations happening to try to handle this problem, especially in Europe. The fact that you have Barcelona Metropolitan Office was a first attempt to try to coordinate a more regional development for not the city, but for a territory that is larger than that. How London Greater Authority was created also at the beginning of the 21st century, and now there are all the institutions that try. There are attempts to, in a way, incorporate a larger portion of land that is not the one of the city, but it's something else, and that I think has been relevant. But in any case, what I wanted to say is that there are many ways in which you can think about this regional development. And normally, I think that it's important to understand that it's a two-way process. I mean, on a certain sense, it is necessary to think from the very local, sometimes grassroots, sometimes just community-based, sometimes just everyday life experience development that has a very significant civic role in the way that we live our cities. And sometimes you have to go from that to the scale of the region and how this kind of a small local let's say, developments, they have also an impact at the territorial level. And sometimes you have to go all the way around, how the territorial kind of planning and idea and development and infrastructures, they have an impact on the local. And I think that whenever you forget this kind of twofold relationship, then you are forgetting how the regional planning is really working. And I think that we have to focus on both, and we have to, as architects, have a vision for that probably at this moment is not going to be, you're complaining about the politicians and so on, but if you're able to start both processes, I think that you will have more opportunities to really discuss this as a level that is not only a conversation, but probably a level that is also related to professional practices, that I think that is, in the end, what is relevant also for many of the people who are sitting here.
Thank you so much, Francisco. Thank you for all of our panelists and exhibitors today. And I would like to thank the audience for these very engaging questions. We're going to take a 1-hour break now, and we will reconvene at 2 p.m. for the last and final round of this year's conference. Thank you so much.